Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, ladies and gentlemen. The Premier League is officially back. It's back, guys. I'm so happy. I felt like I was ready for it now. The weather's not too great outside, but I am with some great people, that's for sure. Patrick Van Straten and Dougie Critchley. Lads, how you doing?
Good man. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. It was wonderful. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever.
It has been a little while, yeah. I feel like when I've come back, you've been off and you're about to go off for a little bit as well. So enjoy your time.
Thank you.
Dougie, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm hoping by the time this video goes live, Sunderland would have won our first game of the season. We would have played Rotherham at home yesterday. You can all laugh at me if that didn't go our way. We desperately need a win after 3 defeats in 3 games. But otherwise, I'm very good, thanks.
Little Sky Sports superstar over there.
Well,
3 days in a row.
Yeah, well, we've all been on there a lot. So Football Daily are doing a little bit more with Sky Sports News for this season. Going on the football show Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. There'll be a mixed cast. And yeah, I really enjoyed that this week. Quite early starts, 5 a.m.ers, so I'm a little bit sleepy, but otherwise all good.
Okay, well then make sure you guys check that out on Sky Sports News and let us know whether you're enjoying it as well. But this is Sunday Vibes, so we've got to talk about a subject. And as you've seen by the title, we're going to be talking about some transfers, some that have happened, some that have possibly not quite happened, and maybe even some rumours as well. Originally, we were looking at this being kind of a panic buys, and obviously the transfer window is not just over yet, so it's a little bit hard maybe to call some of them quite panic buys. But I want to talk about a certain new Liverpool player. Now, over the last few weeks, or really the last 7 days, we've seen Liverpool linked to a couple of midfielders. For a while, it was Romeo Lavia, and he was meant to be their guy that was going to be playing 6 for them. Then, last minute, after Chelsea were stalling and taking ages to try and get a price that they wanted for Moises Caicedo, Liverpool came in, £115 million. It was crazy. I actually remember being here last Thursday shooting Sunday Vibes and us all kind of assuming that it was done. He was going to be going to Chelsea, and the next day, Liverpool came in with this fantastic bid, and it looked like he was then going to be going to Liverpool. In the end, we've all seen what's happened. He's joined Chelsea. Romeo Lavia also joined Chelsea.
Official now, isn't it?
As well. Official. It is Romeo done. And so we've now seen Liverpool spend up to 18 million euros on Wataru Endo from Stuttgart. So firstly, what are our thoughts on the move? Because it is kind of like a 3rd choice, 4th choice transfer that's happened. We've seen them also miss out on a couple of other guys. Bellingham was someone they were linked to for a while. Khéphren Thuram, who obviously hasn't got a new club just yet, but he's just come back from injury. Dukes, is this just a smart fix for the time being?
Yeah, I think, it was maybe 5th or 6th choice. He's not someone that I thought would be going to Liverpool or any Champions League club at the start of the window. But I think given the fact they were so desperate, and given the fact that nearly every club in Europe knew that they had £150 million sitting around, to get someone of his level of experience and quality, I think is not a bad move. They had to get someone in. There's potential that they might sign another sort of defensive-minded midfielder as well, in which case Endo may play more of a squad role, which is potentially what I see him being best as. Because, look, he has played well at Stuttgart over the last 4 years. He helped them get promoted from the Bundesliga 2. He's played the last 3 years in the Bundesliga. Barely missed a game as well, which is really promising for a 30-year-old. Incredibly tenacious, and his body is just so good at the grind of regular football. Having said that, he's never had to deal with European football. He's never really seen Stuttgart go deep in the DFB Pokal, but he has been one of their best players in the last few years. I mean, they have had some useful players. Silas, the young winger that they've had, Sasa Kaladzic before he went to Wolves, Dinos Mavropanos, who now appears close to a move to West Ham. And Endo is really known as someone who can play in a deeper lying role, but he's also been used across the back line. His numbers don't really pop at anything, but he is a solid defensive midfielder. His passing's pretty good. And if you watch some clips of him online, he's pretty dynamic as well. And he's got this amazing leadership ability as well. And he's got a lot of experience for a guy of his age and someone who's been a relatively late bloomer with Japan. He's got over 50 caps. I think he played 4 or 5 games in the World Cup as Japan made it through the group stages. Which contained Germany and Spain as well, so a really difficult group. And last year also was pretty good in the final third as well, 6 goals and 5 assists. I imagine he will be used in that deeper role. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can instantly adapt to the demands of the Premier League. And, with Stefan Bajcetic injured, Liverpool kind of needed him to hit the ground running. Definitely. So there is a little bit of quite a lot riding on him, on the success of this, especially if they can't get another guy in. But personally, I think it was a pretty low-risk move and someone they had to get in.
For this transfer fee as well, with all the fees we've seen for midfielders over the past couple of months, there's a couple going now for over 100 million. He's got to perform really bad for an 18 million euro transfer to be looked at as a poor decision. I mean, this is somebody who was, I think, 5th in the Bundesliga for open play chances created, which is very, very strong. That's up there with the likes of Szoboszlai, who's now at Liverpool. I think that's the thing, right? It now means that McAllister can play further forward. It now means that Szoboszlai can kind of be free maybe from some more defensive duties that we saw him have against Chelsea. Gakpo doesn't have to play in midfield, which I didn't think he looked very suited for against Chelsea at all. And really, I think once Paquetá is back, he's still going to be the guy I think that will get more minutes.
Oh, do you think?
I think so. I think he had a fantastic debut season last year. I really did, and obviously it was unfortunate that he picked up the injuries that he did, and he's obviously still got now. But once he's back fit, I think the idea is probably to develop him because he is really, really interesting. I think he was very, very impressive, and have the experience of Endo there for when they have certain games or when they need to rest him. Obviously, they are in Europa League too. Because I do think the fact that Paquetá is so young, he's already picked up these injuries, they're going to have to be careful with managing him. But Pat, how are you feeling about this move? Because again, with that transfer fee, it's kind of hard to go wrong.
I agree, but I don't think he's not an out-and-out 6 at all. You know, like Dukes has said, he's a very good all-rounder. The fact that he has good passing numbers, good defensive numbers, and good attacking numbers is great. But he doesn't play as a lone 6. It's not what he does. His defensive numbers are not sufficient for that. Of course, what you could do is have him in the midfield and then drop him between the centre-backs. If you split them, he's played in the back line from time to time. And really what he is just a reliable contributor. And actually, in that sense, it's a superior move in the short term to Romeo Lavia. Romeo Lavia, I agree with everyone that he's got superstar potential. He looked very promising last season, but Lavia was extremely inconsistent last year and also didn't have the numbers you'd expect for somebody coming in and starting as a defensive midfielder for Liverpool. If they brought him in, I think that you might have had a couple of seasons where things looked a little bit shaky at the back. And when you're spending over £50 million on a player, it's quite hard to sell that to your fans. Now, in the long term, that might have been the kind of smarter move, maybe, or it would have yielded a little bit more in future. But if you're getting quoted that much for those sorts of players who are themselves not slam dunks, then I think 16 million on somebody like Endo is perfectly fine, especially because if Thiago gets fit again, then you've got him. McAllister can play pretty much anywhere, 6, 8, 10. You're going to hope that you get more pressing out of that front line, which will, in theory, give a little bit more protection for these guys behind. So I think if you can't get Bellingham, if you can't get Rice, if you can't get Caicedo, if Lavia is too expensive and you pissed him off, more of a prospect than a certainty, then I think spending 16 million on someone like Endo, maybe trying to loan in or get somebody else on a cheap deal, and then having a look again at the market next summer, I think is a perfectly fine thing to do. Because actually, over the last few years, what we've seen is every 1 to 2 seasons, you get a new crop of interesting central midfielders coming through. Well, from a Liverpool perspective, I think it makes much more sense to keep your powder dry for the right guy rather than getting somebody like Lavia, who costs as much as the right guy, but isn't actually proven to be that player yet. I say this as someone who's a huge fan of him. I'm not trying to do that signing down for Chelsea, but I think if you were expecting Lavia to come in and start 50 games for Liverpool and be a superstar, I think that actually would have been an unreasonable amount of pressure to put on a player of his age. I think this makes a lot more sense. Nobody has high expectations, and Endo is, at worst, I think, going to be fine.
Yeah. And they've obviously still got the money out there to go and spend on another midfielder that might be up and coming, or hold it until January and see who has a good 6 months.
Well, they're still being linked with Ryan Gravenberch as well, Man United as well, over a potential loan deal. I'm a real big fan of that. I potentially would have been a bigger fan before they signed Szoboszlai and McAllister because he's more suited to the wider midfield roles than that 6 role. I wouldn't play him in that 6 role whatsoever. The thing about Endo, a lot of people watching this will be like, look, I've seen all these things on Twitter about his total stats for the last 3 years, like his duels won, his tackles won, etc. And I think, they do look fantastic, but he's barely missed a minute. Yeah. I think he was 6th for outfielders in the Bundesliga last year, and I think he's missed 2 games with injury in 3 years, as I might have already said. So just by pure amount of game time, and playing for a Stuttgart side that's faced a lot of pressure in that time as well. His total stats are going to look very good.
And I also wonder as well, how's he going to adapt from Stuttgart side that was obviously battling quite lower down the division, now for a Liverpool side that are expecting to dominate possession and get played on the counter-attack and so on and so forth. But only time will tell. Quickly then, let's touch upon Caicedo and Lavia, who obviously went to Chelsea in the end. What do you think of those deals? Because Caicedo, brilliant. Lavia's now come into very, very young. They've got Andre Santos there as well, who they've got from Brazil, extremely young. Chukwuemeka's there. I know he plays slightly further forward. Gallagher's still there. They've suddenly gone from having no midfielders to now having a lot of young midfielders and only a certain amount of minutes to be able to give them this season. How are we feeling about those two?
Well, I think on paper, Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez is the perfect duo on paper, and it should be. They've spent a ridiculous amount of money on both of them, but they're both really, really high potential players and already look like, you know, some of the best young midfielders in Europe. So on paper, that's brilliant. I think Lavia is an interesting decision from him to go to be potentially a backup from day one.
They can play a
at
3.
Chelsea. They could play a 3.
Yeah.
It really depends what formation you're going to play. The thing is with playing a 4 at the back, it probably doesn't get the best out of Chilwell and Reece James, who's now injured.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see how that sort of works. If I was Lavia, I would have gone to Liverpool, but I can understand why, you know, with the money on offer for that set contract, that Chelsea's is very attractive offering. I imagine that it will now mean Conor Gallagher is sold as well, which I'm not totally against if you still get, you know, clubs offering £40 million for him. Albeit it is another academy graduate being sold in the summer where you've already lost Loftus-Cheek, Mount. We'll get onto that in a bit later. So yeah, I think it's a really exciting midfield on paper. Can't wait to see Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez in action.
I also forgot as well Leslie Chukwu as well as joined too, who's a huge physical beast. From
He'll surely be loaned.
He must not be happy.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it depends what his wages are. I'm sure he got a little bump on that.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, he could have got a move at some point and started somewhere, and now he's got a $250 million worth of midfielders starting, you know, in Enzo and Caicedo, and then another 50-60 mil in Lavia on the bench. I don't know. It would disappoint me a little bit.
I saw Poch come out and say he wants a squad of 22, 23, and currently I think we're at
40.
No, we have reduced. I think we're now at like 30. So still a few have got to go.
Okay, so who is still there?
Out.
So a lot will be loaned out then.
I think a couple will be loaned out. We've still got a few. I think we've still got like.
You're still signing endless
5,
Brazilians as well.
International. Yeah, obviously we've
it's like
seen,
a Brazilian a week.
Was it Washington? Is that
he's
Washington. But he's going on loan to Strasbourg along with Gabriel, who's already gone there. But we'll get on to Chelsea in a little bit. Let's jump on to our next transfer right now. Lucas Paquetá. That's how it's pronounced. Paquetá, who's obviously on his way, or looking like he could be on his way, to Manchester City. Man City are supposedly getting nearer to the figure that West Ham won, around £85 million, which is his release clause next year. I think it's probably going to have to go above that if they can possibly get that next year guaranteed. We might be looking at another £100 million transfer. We know when Man City want their man, they will go and get him, but they also do have a price limit as well. Firstly, from West Ham's point of view and fans, they will be gutted. Losing him and Declan Rice in the same summer. Don't get me wrong, they get the right amount of money for him, but they don't have very long to replace him. And obviously, they've just started the Premier League season with him. They're probably their star asset now when you look at that squad.
Him or Bowen, yeah.
From a Man City point of view, I don't mind it. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne is now out for 4 months. I think on Transfer Talk, I was giving it more of a viewpoint from, say, Phil Foden's look, where he's now going, I've just been given a chance now to possibly start week in, week out, and that's possibly been taken away. We had that argument with Joe last week about player of the seasons, and when you put him in your team of the season,
that was kind of provocative.
Season, it was, yeah. The group chat kind of went off when we were speaking about that. But right wing is still a position they need. That can mean that if they get this guy, if they get Lucas Paquetá in, they can then put Bernardo Silva out on the right if needed. Cole Palmer, we've seen,
or Foden,
fantastic.
You know, like Foden, with Mahrez gone and De Bruyne injured, there are a couple of spaces to be filled in this team, and Foden can play either of them. So if they get Dougie, then maybe Foden comes inside. If they get Paquetá, then maybe Foden plays on the wing.
What if they get both?
That would be more of an issue. But I mean, I think when this started doing the rounds, this rumour, there were a lot of people who were like, Paquetá, like to Man City. I think it makes perfect sense. I think he's exactly the right sort of player for them. He can play wide, but essentially what he is best suited to is that free 8 role.
Yeah.
You know, he's been a great progressive passer pretty much his whole career. He's got excellent defensive work rate, had his best defensive season ever last year. He's pretty creative. In his best season at Lyon, I think he got 15 goal involvements, something like that. As somebody who can flex between midfield, attacking midfield, and the wing, he is one of the best around. Now he's got a season of Premier League football under his belt, and I think he's still 25. If he's 26, it's certainly recent. So I think you get a lot of value out of him. I'm not sure so much value that I'd pay over 80 mil, but I think it makes a lot of sense. On the West Ham side, I think West Ham fans have only got their club to blame, really. I mean, like, the Paquetá one thing, that has come out of nowhere, but if they sell him, they're going to get an insane amount of money for him. But Rice, we knew was happening. And it's weird to me that they didn't have options
from the off,
or quality options ready to go. It was like, we're thinking about Palhinha, we're probably going to go for Ward-Prowse, okay, fine, Alvarez, whatever. Yeah. But it just felt like they could have got those moves done faster. And I know they were trying to extract the maximum value from Arsenal for Rice, which I think was, exactly what I'd have done as well. But but that did have a bit of a knock-on effect in terms of compressing their recruitment. Now, Alvarez, I like. Ward-Prowse, I don't. I think that if you turn, 100 mil for Rice into Alvarez, Ward-Prowse, and I don't even know who else they're talking about, I think that's quite bad transfer work, but it's fine. I don't know, like, if they let Paquetá go at this point, they've got to have a plan in place. So if I were them, I'd be really scrambling, figuring out what we're going to do with the money, trying to get the groundwork done on some deals, and then saying yes. Yeah. Because they really, really, really...
It's been very reactive, hasn't it?
It's an area that you can't afford to have this amount of uncertainty about once the season started. There are teams where we're like, well, who are they going to play at left back? Or who's going to be their backup goalkeeper? Those are the questions. Whereas once the season started, asking what is our midfield going to look like is a seriously concerning question to have. That is the kind of thing that you want sorted in July, not sorted after the season has already played 2 games, So West Ham, I think, have had a pretty ropey window, to be honest, even if they end up bringing in £200 million on 2 players.
Do we feel like it's a little bit of a panic buy from City in reaction to the Kevin De Bruyne situation? Obviously, it kind of happened.
I think he was linked slightly before.
But do you think now, with them getting quite serious about the transfer, has been electrified because of KDB?
Yeah, potentially. I also think Cole Palmer's sort of last few games also, lessens the immediate need for him in many ways.
What do you think of Pep coming out and saying he's either being sold or staying? No loan.
Yeah, well, we were talking about this on the football show yesterday, and I don't really get it, to be honest, because I think a loan, he's not at his max value right now, and a loan would make a lot of sense if he's not going to play regularly. This is a player that has shown that he can contribute at Man City if given the minutes. Will he get those minutes? It's pretty uncertain. And has he played so superbly that he should be guaranteed those minutes? Probably not just yet, but I think if you sold him now, you could get £20 million for him. But if you sold him after a successful loan to a mid-table Premier League club, of which many are looking for wide talent, you could be looking at a £30-40 million player. I mean, Chelsea are asking for £40 million for Conor Gallagher.
You could do a buyback.
Yeah, exactly.
That would make sense.
They did that with Lavia, and had a clause in that contract as well. I just feel like Paquetá and Kovacic both have the potential to cover a little bit of what Gundogan brought, but probably neither to the same level as Gundogan brought immediately. Like, I think people forget that Gundogan is so good at controlling the tempo. He picks up great positions. His ball retention is very good, which is kind of what Kovacic brings. He's also very good in the final third, which we saw towards the end of the season from Paquetá. He had a massive impact in their quarter-final against Ghent. He also provided the assist in the game against Fiorentina in the final. But his output for the first part of the season was kind of a little bit down on where I thought it would be. I think that's also slightly down to Moyes slightly misusing him for the first part of the season. He was playing way deeper than I thought he would on the basis of what he'd done for Lyon over the previous few years. I also just think there's probably better value signings out there. He cost £50 million last summer. If they're looking for £80 million quite late in the window, I just don't know whether I'd necessarily go there for City just yet.
Okay. At the same time, if it shouldn't be a kind of panic buy, because this was a completely predictable situation for Man City in the same way that selling Rice was predictable for West Ham. Kevin De Bruyne has had a history of hamstring and ankle injuries over the last few years. This injury now is a recurrence of one from the end of last season. He's into his 30s, comfortably into his 30s now, you have to expect that when he plays, he's going to be worse or he's going to play less. Those are the two things that's what decline looks like. They can look just as good when they're on the field, but they're on the field less. So Man City, I imagine, were succession planning for De Bruyne, and this might just mean moving up and paying a little bit more when maybe their plan was, okay, we consider the buyout for Paquetá next summer, and we see if anyone else emerges in the meantime. I think Paquetá for Man City feels like a much more natural fit than Dougie, who is way more of a soloist, who's much more raw. He just seems like somebody who is the kind of player that actually Pep was kind of culling from the City squad a couple of years ago when he was like, let's get rid of Sané. It feels like that would be quite a strange move. And Paquetá feels actually very Man City in that he's a controller.
I do wonder as well whether Man City are starting to think about the future after Pep. He's now won the treble. He's done the Champions League for them. There's that talk about 2025 might be the time he calls it. We've already seen before from his book that he wants to go into managing Brazil, whether that's something he still wants to do.
That would also be like a 9-year stint at City.
Exactly.
Carlo's
that's his longest by a long time. Sorry.
Carlo's going to be at Brazil.
Yeah, very true, very true. I've got a slight feeling we might see Roberto De Zerbi step into the old Man City.
It'd be a very philosophical, a good fit philosophy-wise. But I mean, who knows what's happening in 2 years' time? There might be the next superstar managers emerge.
Exactly. Very, very true. Very
the one thing I'd add on the De Bruyne thing was the commentators on Friday, so don't shoot the messenger, were saying that De Bruyne was quite surprised to be playing because, their season obviously finished really late. He didn't feature a lot in pre-season because of this hamstring injury. And then he gets injured in the first half. And we saw in 2019-20 where Liverpool won the league. Yes, Liverpool were fantastic. I'm not trying to demean it, but City also didn't have Aymeric Laporte, who got injured. I think he did his ACL in a tackle with Adam Webster, I think it was. And Leroy Sané got injured in the Community Shield. And at the time, they were two massive players for Man City. And it feels like, with City still scrambling around to try and fix their squad at the moment, they always, stereotypically start the season quite slowly as well because they tend to finish the previous season so late. It feels like Arsenal have the potential to put some really big pressure on in the next few weeks.
I thought it was interesting their game against Sevilla. Put it that way. I thought there's some things to be got at for now. Okay, let's jump over to the Midlands then and talk about Aston Villa, who have been linked to two moves. We've got Acuna from Sevilla, who we saw play against Man City and actually thought played really, really well. And they're also linked to Galatasaray midfielder Nicolo Zaniolo. Two moves that seem quite reactionary, really. We've seen Emi Buendia out now for a long, long time. Surprised, obviously, there's not been any talks really about a centre-back after Tyrone Mings' injury. We've also seen that Alex Moreno is out for the time being. I think he's meant to be back in September, and he's quite crucial. And there are rumours that Digne might be on his way out of the club. So they do feel like quite reactionary moves. Acuna is quite old, solidly into his 30s as well.
He's going to be 32 in October.
So 32 in October.
Still younger than me, but fine.
So arguably in his prime.
Old.
But and so his numbers are good fun, but for the price that is being looked at the moment of around £13 million, not too expensive for him. And really, if Alex Moreno comes back, I think that's like good cover that works in this Unai Emery system. The one that I'm not such a big fan of is Zaniolo. Honestly, Zaniolo's injury history is outrageous. He got 352 minutes for Galatasaray last season and got 5 goals, which is actually a very solid return. You can't complain at that at all. But in the last 3 years, he's had 17 different injuries, including his shoulder, calf, groin, and ACL, which kept him out for 63 games.
And he's at Galatasaray for a reason. When he came through, people were like, this guy is so talented. Yeah. And now he's at Galatasaray.
He was linked to Spurs last year.
That's an
He was
injury
linked solidly
situation.
to Spurs
And
last year and Bournemouth, and then in the end ended up at Galatasaray.
Is it a loan with an obligation or a loan with an option or something? Because that was also being talked about.
Yes, I think it's originally a loan with some sort of option to get him in.
But then that's fine. I think that's completely fine. Like if he doesn't work out, then it's okay, and maybe he just covers you a little bit until Buendia is. But is that the worst thing on earth?
He's basically told, from what I've seen, Galatasaray, he wants to join the Premier League. That's the thing that he absolutely is certain about. And so I think Galatasaray kind of we've got to make this happen for him because he's barely playing for us anyway, and he's on our books for wages. I think it's. If it's a loan with an option to buy, I think it's okay. If it's a loan with an obligation to buy, I think I like it a lot less because I just think he legitimately might play 300 minutes for you. this season.
Yeah.
His output's also quite overrated. I think he got 42 goals and assists in his entire time at Roma. He got more yellow and red cards than that. And, caused a little bit of a scene in January trying to move to Bournemouth, then that fell through.
He's also currently
injured.
injured.
Then he agreed to go to Galatasaray, then apparently he wanted to go back to Bournemouth. He's injured. Yeah, I didn't even know that. Injured right now. And you mentioned his injuries. He's missed 125 games with injury. That's Neymar levels. And Neymar's what? 7 years older than him? It's crazy. The actual one that I dislike more is Acuna, though. I just think it's so classic of Monchi to be like, I'll just only trust people that I know and people that I brought beforehand. People were saying that Monchi slightly lost his touch in the market, and I actually thought the start of this window went pretty well for Aston Villa. But there were rumours last year, or analysts saying that he's built a Sevilla side that really lacks youth, energy, forward thrust, that it was very stagnant. And that is partly down to the guy that builds the squad, especially when he takes on such a major role in recruitment. And Acuna, as Pat says, 32 in October. If Luca Digne wants to go, it is quite a thin market at left back. I do agree with that. But could they bring in someone like Reguilon on loan from Spurs, or Sergi Gomez from Man City, who's surely not getting any minutes in this Man City squad that only like players over 6'2" in their defence, or get a right back, which you need more probably. Well, actually, with Digne leaving, you need a left back and a right back. But I think it's only Matty Cash on their book as a right back, which is pretty worrying. And I remember sitting here at the start of the summer being like, Aston Villa need a right back who can also play on the right, all up the line, and went for Ridley Bakker of Wolfsburg. He's still available. Although it is quite late in the window, maybe Niko Kovac would want to keep hold of him. But I just think Acuna is very boring and just a lack of inventiveness in the market.
But do you not think Moreno is the starter?
Well, exactly. I didn't know how serious his injury was.
He is meant to be back in September.
Yeah, but even still, you're still having to pay this guy's fee and pay his salary, and you're probably going to have to give him, I assume, at least a 2-year, but potentially more than that, deal. It's going to take him up till he's 35. I just don't. It just feels like they could do something else. Like Manchester United, their backup left back right now is Tyrell Malacia. Yeah. They're willing to have somebody who's pretty raw, pretty young, who doesn't play that much on the bench, and then in the future they'll have an asset who will either play or be sold. Well, I don't see why Villa can't do that. Can they not go and take a gamble? I mean, Monchi, in a way, it might be that Monchi's expertise, the era of it it's been squeezed out, basically, because what Monchi used to do really, really well was especially trawl the French market for little gambles, and Sevilla would take quite low budget, risks on them, and quite often they pan out. Whereas what we've seen in recent years, we've seen especially Serie A and the Premier League have been recruiting heavily from Ligue 1. So now if there's a good young midfielder in Ligue 1, quite often they're going to the Premier League. They're going to mid-table in the Premier League. Now we've even seen some of them go off to Saudi Arabia. So you're in a situation where, Real Madrid are going to go and buy a Monaco midfielder for 60 million, and somebody like Chet Doucouré gets hoovered up by Crystal Palace. Well, those teams are richer than Sevilla. So Monchi, I think maybe it was inevitable that he was going to struggle to keep the same edge that he'd had for all those years. Whether he can replicate it with slightly more money at Villa, replicate that success, get into a different mindset, that's really hard to say. But I kind of agree with Dukes. My issue with Monchi has always been that Monchi does what he knows, what he's comfortable with, and he probably needs to reinvent himself if he's going to be successful there.
Okay, and obviously with the Tyrone Mings injury, they've got Carlos, who's obviously come back from his long-term injury himself, Consa there.
Thrust in at Newcastle when they were 3-1 down, I think.
Yeah.
Boubacar Kamara as well can play centre-back.
So do you think they don't need to go out there and get a centre-back, or do you think they might actually have a look?
Probably have to back the guy you spent £40 million on in Pau Torres, although he did look incredibly shaky against Newcastle. It is quite a difficult system because the line is so high under Emery, but they looked all over the place, and Consa started making errors and the whole team got destabilised, and actually Newcastle could have scored way more in the end. I actually thought there was a period just before half-time, which is actually when I switched on the game. I think it was from about 30 minutes to 45, and I thought Aston Villa looked really good. But then in the second half, it just all fell apart quite dramatically.
Against the Newcastle side as well, that looked again quite frightening this season. Okay,
so much energy in that side.
Let's jump over to West London. We spoke a little bit about them earlier. Chelsea. We're going to end up, I think, talking about 3 different players here in this section. Firstly, a panic sale. I actually think this one is Lewis Hall. Lewis Hall, who looks like he could be on his way to Newcastle United. He actually grew up as a Newcastle fan as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the fee looks around about £30 million. I've also seen about
Is he a Geordie?
35. I don't know. I think he might have been like his dad supported Newcastle, but
nice.
he's from Surrey.
Big up the North East.
Exactly. I'm not too sure on that one, so don't quote me on that. Now, he was close to signing a 6-year deal with Chelsea, which then had him going on loan to Crystal Palace. I don't know if the Michael Olise stuff happened and then that kind of got cancelled or whatever happened there, or by the fact of them buying or spending that money they spent on Caicedo and Lavia means they now need to sell a pure profit player who's obviously somebody from the academy like Hall.
Does that sadden you?
It saddens me in the fact that I think like academy guys are not getting a chance, and Lewis Hall, I think, maybe I'm kind of overblowing it a little bit. I think he's really, really exciting. He's a guy that can play left back, left mid, left wing, and central midfield. But the issue is he going to be central midfield in this Chelsea squad? No. Is he going to be left wing in this Chelsea squad? No. Is he going to be left back? Probably not. Especially now with Ian Maatson there as well, who's actually playing on the wing for us right now. And I think sometimes I saw a lot of Chelsea fans kind of getting really annoyed at this. And whilst it is frustrating, Chelsea have spent nearly £1 billion over a year.
3 windows.
Something's got to give, right? And a lot of fans are celebrating the moves of Caicedo, Lavia, Gabriel, David Washington. List goes on.
Yeah, but Chelsea Twitter's just like
Eventually,
kids in sweet shops. They're just like, transfer.
It is. And like, it's a shame. It is a shame because I honestly think he's someone that could be superb. And I think he'll fit this Newcastle side really well. Whether they want him to play in midfield, whether they want to play an attacking left back, which is what I think they do want to do, or what Eddie Howe said that he wants to do. And Lewis Hall is somebody that I think will develop massively if he gets these minutes. This is a guy who, in his games last season, he only got about 650 minutes last year. But I think he played against Man City 3 times as well, against very good opposition in the likes of Phil Foden, Riyad Mahrez, down on their right flank, Chelsea's left flank. And his numbers were outsane. His numbers were insane. Brilliant on the ball, brilliant dribbler, decent defensively, contributing, creating a lot of chances going forward. And so he is.
Can I ask you a question, Zach? You've been asking us the questions. I want to switch on to you. Would you have rather kept Conor Gallagher? You might still keep him.
Yeah.
Use Andre Santos and Ugo Chukwu as your midfield backups. Not sign Lavia and keep Lewis Hall, or are you happy that you brought in Lavia and have to lose Hall? It doesn't work out as simply as
it's
that.
Not straight swap.
If that is the but if that is the situation that because of Lavia you have to sell another academy graduate.
I think I'm quite split down the middle. If I'm being deadly honest, like I think for me, I've loved seeing academy graduates come through at Chelsea. Like it's the same thing for Arsenal, right? Yeah. Seeing Saka absolutely dominate it, right? And it was great seeing Mason Mount playing. It was great seeing Tammy Abraham.
You can still see Mason Mount play.
Old Trafford. And Reece James, right? And it felt like we'd finally gone through this era of, okay, now Chelsea are finally giving their academy graduates minutes.
Well, you probably have a transfer ban coming, so it might all happen again.
Yeah, maybe, quite possibly. So yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame, but also like, it's hard to sit here and be like, oh my God, we've got one of the best, possibly best DMs in the world, or potential in Caicedo. Like something's got to give, I think.
Well, and the other thing about it is that like it's not like you've traded in those academy graduates. It's not like City where people are like, well, they don't really play their kids. But that's because they have the best players in the world playing for them and they win everything.
Yeah.
Like it's like Chelsea are selling academy graduates so that you can bring in players who are also very young and are mostly potential. So you're like, in 5 years' time, like we're going to be really good, and you're like, you could do this with your academy kids.
What this is, like, if we're looking at a like-for-like thing, this is you've signed Marc Cucurella for £60 million last year.
It's 100%.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't and you can't sell him. Like I remember, obviously, we saw I think a week ago, there were links of Newcastle looking at him, and it was like, oh my God, amazing. But obviously, the thing is with Lewis Hall is this is pure profit you're going to get for your FFP here, not like the loss you'll probably take if you sell Marc Cucurella. And so, yeah, it's a real shame. It's a real shame. But this is the business you do. Like, if you do poor business, something's got to give. And unfortunately, for Chelsea, that's Lewis Hall. Yeah. But probably fortunately for Lewis Hall, he'll be playing. He'll get a lot of minutes and develop really well. Like we can sit here in January and very much be going, "Wow, what a mistake for Chelsea." But that's the risk of the transfer business, I guess.
Nice for Newcastle as well. They've got Livramento as a backup on one side, very young, high potential. They've got Lewis Hall as a backup for Dan Burn. You assume, but he could also play in midfield.
I don't think it'll be long for, especially if he's looking to play this attacking fullbacks that he wants to do. I don't think it'd be long for him to.
He is very young. It would be unusual for a Champions League side to be starting, like, is he 19?
He's 18.
Like an 18-year-old fullback every game. Like, don't get me wrong, I think he's got loads of potential, but he got like, what, 500 minutes last season, played for Chelsea. Like, to go from that to starting every game for a side which is competing for top 4 and playing Champions League football, that is a tall order.
If he can touch upon 1,200 minutes this year,
that'd be great.
That would be really nice.
Agreed.
Really nice.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, touchwood for him, that will happen. Even touchwood more so that we don't sell him, but we'll see. And then obviously,
I think it's done.
Yeah, it's not looking great for me. Obviously, we then saw Olise happen.
And then
35 million.
Another academy.
Another academy graduate from Chelsea. He was supposed to be coming back. In the end, that didn't happen. He signed a brand new Crystal Palace contract. I'm not. How many?
Amazing work.
Have we
from
seen
Steve
how many
Parish.
years it was?
I'm not sure.
Supposedly, I
it's
saw.
like 4.
Okay, supposedly, there might be a release clause in that. It apparently is 4 years. Now, fantastic for him, I think, because I don't think he would have been starting at Chelsea. I really don't. Like, he would have been possibly playing on the right wing where there's Sterling, Madueke. He could have possibly been playing 10, which is possibly where Nkunku's going to come back to. So he might have got a couple of months. But I think for himself, his development at Crystal Palace, and obviously for Crystal Palace fans, brilliant that he's staying there, surely.
I think that does suggest he could have started. Like, I mean, Sterling, I don't think is going to play on the right. Like, Sterling will want to play on the left, right? So he'd have been up against
I guess he's actually playing.
Sure, but okay, looking at your wingers, your set of wingers, you've got what? Madueke, Sterling, Mudryk.
Nkunku could play that, but
Nkunku's not going to play there, and he's injured.
Yeah.
Jackson technically, but not really.
That's where he kind of
okay.
Formation.
So basically, you've got kind of like, well, and you've got Hudson-Odoi who you need to do something with, but you've essentially got like 3 wingers who could feasibly start. Well, if I were Olise, I'd be like, am I not ahead of like one of these guys? I can get ahead of Mudryk, I could get ahead of Madueke, and Sterling is a completely different kind of player from me. Like, I don't know, I could kind of imagine him thinking, I can definitely start in this side, 100%. But I think what really happened is that his team leaked that he had a release clause. Chelsea thought, that's interesting, and said, we'll pay the release clause. And his team went to Palace and they said, you know what, if you give us a new deal, then we won't go. And it's a win for everybody, and that's what's happened.
Well, also, right, if you're his team, you're going, we saw how much you were offering Zaha. Let's increase this a little bit and start conversations.
That's unreasonable. When he's fit, he is awesome.
Definitely.
11 assists last season and a couple of goals. I mean, he's a really interesting player. We're going to come on to a player in a minute who I think is like, who almost gets more attention than him, but I think is a significantly inferior player to him.
Is that Johnson?
Yes, Brennan Johnson.
Okay, because we have seen the links as well after this happened. Apparently they were also being rumoured last week as well that Nottingham Forest's Johnson, who can play striker, can
Steve
play on the
Cooper's
wing,
Johnson.
can play at 10 sometimes I've seen, is being linked to Chelsea for 50 million quid. Now, look, I'm not a massive fan of this move. I think he had a great year last year.
He's like got an Anthony Gordon.
Did he have a great
Anthony
year?
Gordon
8 goals, 3 assists is not bad.
I think I saw that 5 of his goals came in a
not
7-game period.
And also, when you play every game, like if you play a whole, when you look at 8 goals, you're like, oh, it's pretty good. But when you've played the whole season, it's not actually that great. Like his expected goal numbers, it's under 0.3 per 90, which is pretty poor for a guy who was basically playing up front at the end of the season. And his shot numbers are low. His creativity is almost non-existent. He dribbles a little bit, but not very much. His dribble success is horrible. It's like 1 in 3. I mean, it's
not really involved in building that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that he's talentless, and he's at that age where if this season he went from getting 1.6 shots a game, which is where he currently is, which sucks, to 2.2, and then next season went up a little bit more, that would not be surprising. That's probably the route for him to become a really good player, for him to just add shots, which does kind of happen in people's early 20s. But right now, I mean, you just look at him and you're like, what does this guy do? Whereas at least Olise, you're like, Olise's had some injuries, Olise's been in and out. But I look at Olise and I'm like, I can absolutely see the superstar here. I do not see that superstar in Brennan Johnson in the same way I didn't see it in Anthony Gordon.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when even Brentford were looking at him, because the fee, even when Brentford were looking at him, was massive. And I think, I don't mean to, talk badly of him. He's a very young player who could be good. He could be very good, but he's probably at the right level club for him right now. I think by the end of last season, he was kind of being outplayed in his own side by Morgan Gibbs-White. Awoniyi probably looks more promising as well. Just stay at Forest. Just stay at Forest. I don't think he's good enough to play on the right-hand side for Chelsea. I don't think he's good enough to play down the middle for Chelsea. He's kind of like an inferior Timo Werner at the moment.
Boy.
And I just don't think he worked out very well at Chelsea either. Like
no.
that style of player, you need a little bit more about you technically in tight spaces, I think. And I just don't think he's ready.
No, I completely agree. I think you covered that fantastically well. Let's jump over then to our last player we're going to go on to and then do some quick fire questions. We saw this kind of break actually last night, Thursday evening, for you guys at home watching on a Sunday. Joao Felix to Barcelona on loan for a fee of €8 million actually might be happening now.
Is
We
it?
obviously saw Felix come out say that his dream is to play for Barcelona whilst playing for Atletico Madrid. He's fallen out with the board. He's fallen out of Simeone. I feel like we've gone over this a few times now. Wow. I mean, for him,
I didn't see the reports that this was actually happening.
So it's basically taken a step forward. Barcelona are much more keener to pay this fee. Obviously, it's a lot of money for a loan fee. It's much better than Chelsea paid for 11 million for 6 months. But what do we think of that transfer in general? Is it again not just kicking the can down the road?
We talked about it quite a lot. We talked quite a lot about it on Continental Club actually. So go check that out as well. But it felt like the rumours were that Barcelona were thinking of bringing in Joao Felix, but would probably have to let someone go. If they did that, it's probably going to be Ansu Fati. I think that's the wrong decision.
Yes.
Ansu Fati, quite a bit younger. Yes, he's had his injury issues, but had better output last season. And just looks like a player that can play quite comfortably on the wing. Whereas Joao Felix, I feel like, isn't good enough to take Pedri's place or Gundogan's place as like one of the attacking midfielders. Yeah. And he's definitely not good enough to take Lewandowski's place. And isn't creative enough to play in another position necessarily. So I just don't think it's a good fit for Barcelona whatsoever. I think I'd be looking for an out-and-out winger, potentially, even though, Abdi's played all right. Yamal looks pretty promising as well. And they've lost Ousmane Dembele, of course. They just look short of real top-quality wingers.
Do you think a little bit of it is the big name factor that Felix brings?
I thought Barcelona was supposed to be moving away from this and starting to get more intelligent. Can they sign? I'd also prioritise getting Joao Cancelo through the door before Felix.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough thing. If you guys want to check out more about them talking about Joao Felix, check out Continental Club. That was out on Thursday. Okay, lads, that is the main segment done. But let's jump onto some quick fire questions.
We haven't done quick fires in ages. This is
I know.
Nice.
I always want to try and bring them back because they are good fun. This one comes from VS Game 8. And they've asked, we have seen so many ACL injuries during pre-season and the first round of fixtures. Do the start of the leagues need to be postponed to give players enough time to be match ready and avoid long-term injuries? What do you think the fix is, lads? Because we are seeing a crazy amount of ACLs.
I don't know. I'm not a doctor and have never studied ACL injuries or whatever. It does feel weird that there's been so many in the last couple of weeks. Is it just a crazy coincidence? Maybe. Is it something to do with the hardness of the pitches at this time of year? Maybe. Although in the UK it's been really wet this summer.
Though
so that
on
doesn't make sense either.
in pre-season, some of the American pitches are really rough. I just think the amount of minutes.
Yeah,
man.
some of the pitches that Chelsea were playing on.
They were not amazing. Not amazing, that's for sure. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised probably more injuries didn't happen whilst on them. I think it's down to minutes though. These guys over the last few years they've played since obviously the COVID year where it delayed the start of the season. We've then had the Euros that was pushed back a year. That meant they only had a couple of weeks off. Yeah. We've then seen the World Cup that happened last summer, which then meant this season ended later and started earlier. They're just playing so much football.
There were also longer games now.
And there were also there was AFCON in there for some players. There were 2 Copas America in there in 2019 and 2021. So there are people like, when Richarlison went to Spurs, there were people saying Richarlison has had no more than 4 weeks off or something in 4 years.
It's rough. I think the problem is they'll never delay it. They won't ever do this because obviously there's too much money and the amount.
But also it doesn't help.
Do you not? How long? How do you think it would help? Then how do you think what the answer is?
I think delaying the start of the season is a bandage for a bullet wound. It doesn't fix the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is too many fixtures,
games,
or you need bigger squads. The only other way around it is to have teams with bigger squads and more substitutes. And they've moved towards more substitutes. That's good. But you essentially might need to let teams just have larger squads. Yeah. Because if you want them to play, they're already playing up to 60 games a year right now, plus international fixtures. That's going to go up when the Champions League changes. Yeah. How are teams possibly going to manage it? Because fundamentally, a team knows that there are huge economic benefits to be earned from finishing higher up the table, from qualifying for Europe, blah, 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 avoiding relegation. So they're never going to rest players who are important unless they absolutely have to, or unless they know that other teams have to do it too and they've got sufficient options to cover for it. Well, they can't do that right now. So, I mean, essentially, it's the same as everything in football, which is we're going to make a decision which we think will mean more football and it will mean a better product. Well, they don't really care about a better product, but it's going to be more money. It's going to be more football, which means more money. And we will think a little bit about supporters, a little bit, because we do want them to continue to pay for it. And the last people anybody thinks about are the players. They don't care. And so it's perhaps no surprise that there are a lot of players right now who are going to Saudi Arabia and saying, I will take a massive guaranteed paycheck right now because what I see coming down the pipeline is significant risk to my well-being.
I think that's a fantastic answer, Pat. Yes,
cheers, Hum.
Sorry about obviously the noise in the background. Well, they are.
One thing I would add is potentially, so France had four competitions.
You can say get rid of the EFL.
Coupe de la Ligue got scrapped a couple of years ago. I think just get rid of the EFL Cup. Yeah. I know it sounds brutal, and I know there's a big sponsorship, and there's things to think about there.
The money.
And there's also the history of blooding young players, the history of the competition. But if we need something to get rid of, just get rid of the EFL Cup.
Or find a way to make it geared towards kind of quote unquote smaller teams.
Yeah.
Like make it one of those things where like only a few Premier League teams go into it or something. Like find some way to do it.
Or if you're in Europe, you don't compete in it or something.
Or if you're in the Premier League, you can do it, but you have to field like 4 academy players or something like that. Just find some way to blend it a little bit.
I think they were in discussions about possibly changing it in some way. I can't remember what the outcome from that was or if that's even happened yet. But I remember there were some discussions. This one comes from Belzy NUFC. Do you still think Tonali was an overpayment looking at the fees now being paid for other midfielders?
I think this is directed at me, so I might as well field this one. I did say it at the time. I think he signed in June, and it did feel like a very different time.
And how much was it then? 60?
I think it was
70 mil.
Was it 70 million euros?
70 million euros.
70 million euros, so what, around 60 million pounds. I think, obviously, that looks like a better deal now. I think the fees, less so for Rice, because he's got a lot of top-level experience, but Caicedo in particular does feel like a vast fee for a very high potential player. Tonali looked brilliant in his debut. I didn't necessarily, which I was so keen to stress at the time, but no Newcastle fan would listen. I didn't think he was a bad player. I just didn't necessarily think that it was the best player that Newcastle could have signed for that money.
Yeah.
I actually thought at the time that they probably needed a bit more creativity in that midfield, and actually James Maddison would have been a probably better fit for them. Tonali is quite similar. He's basically a very souped up Sean Longstaff. And I really do mean that in the best possible sense. Like, he's very high energy, but he's got very good dead ball ability. You know, he is got some defensive capabilities. He can dribble a little bit, but he's not outstanding in any category just yet. Doesn't mean he won't one day be. And he started very, very well at Newcastle. But would James Maddison have taken that side to a higher level? I potentially think so.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the thing. Like, as much as there are moves like Caicedo and Rice, which are really expensive, and Lavia, which is really the only one that I think changes this. Tonali still costs more than Maddison. He costs more than Mount, or about the same. He costs about the same as Kai Havertz. Is that better? I mean, those guys at least have things in their numbers and things in their history which make you excited. Whereas Tonali, I don't know. I feel like they could have got somebody else to do this role for less money. That's the issue. It's not that he's going to be necessarily bad. It's when you sign one player, you give up an opportunity. But everyone's always looking to get hurt. Did you see the thing about our Milan-Brighton conversation?
Yeah.
People were so annoyed about it. And it was like, have you watched the clip where we basically like are treating it as a joke, comparing Brighton and Milan? And everyone's like, Milan have so many Champions Leagues. And they're like weeping all over their keyboards at us. It's like, guys.
That was.
like,
I knew that would stir
down.
people up on Twitter, and I was like, McCubs, that'd be a great clip to put on Twitter. But it was obviously tongue-in-cheek. But
No.
it was
That's
kind of
good
lost.
fun.
No, I would choose Brighton over Milan.
Well,
in a
whilst
heartbeat.
talking about Newcastle, we always mentioned in this video, it looks like Lewis Hall's actually just been confirmed to join
Good luck
the
to him.
Geordies on a permanent. So that is my heart broken. One last question.
For like the
many
third
breaks have you
time this
had?
summer.
Yeah.
You've got as many heartbreaks as United had title challenges last season. It's the same
And then
thing.
there's just like a little bandage of a new signing being like
Yeah.
slowly coming
Yeah,
in.
exactly.
Who's the next
Romeo
one?
Lavia, like ibuprofen.
This final one, Ali, this comes from, who has the bigger legacy now, Sir Alex or Pep Guardiola?
Wow. Well, so, I mean, Pep's still going. So
Yeah.
his legacy, it feels like we're not ready to talk about his legacy yet.
Okay.
Who's had a bigger impact on football? Pep Guardiola. who won more trophies, Sir Alex Ferguson, who had better longevity, who changed football more, Pep Guardiola, whose teams do I prefer watching, Pep Guardiola. But no disrespect to Sir Alex Ferguson, he's second on the list.
I've got another question. I actually put this one in there just for you, Dougie, to be honest.
Oh, God.
From Just John NUFC. Suddenly, lots of Newcastle fans.
Haven't I just...
Favourite
They're all
kit?
You're so angry about the Madison
No, don't worry. Favourite kit of all time that's not from the team you support?
Oh, right.
I
he wants me to pick a Newcastle pick.
No. You can pick whatever kit you want.
What do I have? I'm going to go for one I own. I really like my blue Boca Juniors kit, which always gets the Boca fans excited when I wear that. I think the Barcelona, McCubb's actually got it for his birthday, who's behind the camera now. The centenary shirt for Barcelona was really smart in 1999. Is that right, McCubb's? He's giving a nod. That was really nice as well.
Amazing. Any come to mind for you, Pat, just quickly?
I assume we're not allowed international because it's kind of cheating.
No.
Oh, okay, because obviously, like Nigeria have had some incredible kits, and there were some Portuguese ones in the early 2000s that were really like rich burgundy and really rich green. But club-wise,
players sweated into that.
I'm always really bad at remembering kits. Like, unless they're like the Venezia ones that we've seen recently.
Those are sick. The all black,
they are sick.
The all black Dortmund one as well. Do you remember that? A couple of years ago, that was cool.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'd say the kind of the Batistuta era Fiorentina kits. I'd say the Nintendo Fiorentina kits.
Good shout.
Any shirts in the late 90s were just...
There actually are some late 90s Newcastle kits that are also fantastic too, has to be said. Well, there you have it, guys. Let us know what you guys thought of all of this episode, from the panic buys to what your favourite kit that is from a club that you don't support, in the comments below. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you haven't already, check out the boys on Continental Club on Thursday. Check out We Need to Talk on Friday. We've got a team talk coming to you guys next week, so stay tuned for that. The way you can do that is by subscribing to Football Daily right now by hitting that big red button. And while you're down there, like the video as well. And we'll see you guys on Monday tomorrow for Monday Vibes. See you later. Bye.